Welcome back to the Four Podmen, the wrestling podcast we bring you each and every week on the Dynamo Podcast Network. Head over to YouTube, smash that subscribe and bell notification button. And while you're over there, check out all the various shows that we offer you on the network and share and subscribe. Also, audio versions of the show are available on Anchor. And if you'd like to contact the show, you'll find us on Twitter at @TPodmen. Joining me tonight for an interesting episode, to say the least, as we continue our review series of the Dark Side of the Ring. Tonight we're going to look at the one Dynamite Kid. Joining me as always, the podfather of the network, Ian. How we doing, man?
Looking forward to this. Well, I am and I haven't.
The man who brings the beef to the podcast, Joe, the Beef Duignan. How are you, Joe?
I'm in excellent form.
Awesome. We'll change that very quickly. And also, my hot tag partner, as always, the DOGG. How we doing, Jay?
Oh, fuck yeah. I'm in great form considering it's sunny and I'm burnt and I'm, full of whiskey. That's why, I guess.
Absolutely.
I've been your internet doctor. Thank you. Good night.
Well, I suppose, lads, looking at this episode, like many of those Dark Side of the Ring episodes before it, a tough watch to say the least. But again, a kind of a fuller version of a story, if you like. I suppose, Ian, we'll probably start with you because you're close with the family and stuff like that, and you have a lot of correspondence with them. You had Bronwyn on a few weeks ago. If you want to check out Dynamo's Dozen with Bronwyn, she was on chatting with Ian all about her dad and stuff like that. She's Dynamite's daughter who was on Dark Side of the Ring. It's fair to say the episode starts out and it's very complimentary of Dynamite Kid. He was an innovator, all that kind of stuff. Ian, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I want to preface it as well because I did let the family know that we were doing this show. So I'm always kind of respectful of people that are watching and let them know that we're going to give our own opinions and that they are our own opinions, you know what I mean, from what we're actually watching. So Brahman and Michelle, obviously ex-wife Dynamite, and Brahman, the daughter. And I suppose you can speak for Amaris and Marek, who are his other two kids as well. I know Amaris was on the show. But for people that weren't on the show and don't necessarily agree with the show, I just want to give a shout out to Mark Billington, obviously Dynamite's brother, who's very, very protective over him. And his two boys, Tom and Mark as well. If anyone hasn't seen Tom, Mark Billington's son, he is the spitting image of Dynamite Kid and actually works exactly like him as well. So there's going to be another one, another Dynamite on the way. But, all positive. They're doing great work, the two young boys. Over in the UK. So just want to say that, listen, we're always respectful of things. We have to do these shows. We've done a difficult show last week as well. That was tough to get through. And I think we're, from my perspective, I'm just going to do it. It's coming from respect. We're not making money from this at the end of the day. We're giving our opinions on shows that we watch. So to all the family, and I'm sure I can speak for all three boys, we're just giving our opinions and thoughts on this. And we'll go. I mean, to start at Niall, it was, kind of knew the narrative. For me, it was a case of like, what narrative are they going to go with? You know what I mean? Are they going to just start off into bad stuff straight away and keep it bad for the whole time? I think it was an interesting start. I watched it twice just because the first time I was trying to get my head around it. The second time I was trying to, be a broadcast journalist, as Bobby the Brain would say. And I thought the way they went into some of the stuff, it showed that he was quite a good kid when he came over. Do you know what I mean? Just full of enthusiasm, no bad habits, wasn't a drinker, wasn't even a smoker, wasn't into anything. It was just all about the craft. And I guess all three of you men will agree with me. You could see that in his work, in the early days. You know what I mean? It was just talking about innovation. It's absolutely crazy. I have to say, I give Dave Meltzer 10 out of 10 on this show as well. In particular, he came across really well and very kind of really putting that across that, he was so kind of ahead of his time and kind of almost I didn't really like it was lit the spark of what we see now. Well, I don't think so. I don't think we see a lot of Dynamite Kid now. Maybe in a handful of guys you would, without being too harsh. But yeah, the story of Dynamite is well known. He came over basically as a skinny kid to Calgary with Bruce Hart, and was probably promised a lot more money and a lot more cars from Bruce at that particular time than he got. But that's another story for another day. But no, I thought it started off good. Obviously, it showed, the connection between himself and Brett and the two wives. Obviously, you could see he was straight in with the family there. Stu absolutely fell in love with him because of his work. Skinny little bastard, aren't you? So I'd say that was always something on his mind, lads, and I always kind of knew that anyway. But I'd say that was always in the back of his mind. Being a smaller guy myself, it was coming from that time, and it must have been far worse for him, especially growing up in the, coming up in the late 70s and 80s when the steroids and the big men really were such a pivotal thing to kind of get you work. You know what I mean? I'd say that was always something that hindered him. But yeah, no, I thought the start of the show was pretty good. I'll hand it back over to you so I don't babble on too much.
Yeah, absolutely. Joe, I thought that Ian alluded to Dave Meltzer there. I thought that line was unbelievable, that there'd be no Jushin Liger if it wasn't for Tiger Mask and Dynamite Kid. And, there's probably not a bigger compliment you could pay to a man than that statement right there in terms of his wrestling and his ring work. And what was your feeling?
Or Rey Mysterio, as they said.
Yeah, no, look, the Radicals wouldn't have existed, lads. Let's be honest here. Cruiserweight wrestling wouldn't have been a thing on WCW, even, I'd say. Yeah. It would be around now, I'd imagine, but it would have been way later, except for him. And like I know, I just want to, for something you said, Ian, about whether they'd go with bad from the very start and keep it going, but like he didn't do a whole lot wrong, if you know what I mean. It was only later on in his career when his body started to break down that he started
breaking down.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean. His body broke down, his brain broke down. That things went wrong, started to go wrong for him. But from what I can gather, anyway, so that you wouldn't have had much of a show to run on going from all bad stuff. But
sure.
He was like, his work was absolutely and utterly phenomenal. There's no doubt about that. I thought
wasn't
that
work;
line,
it was art.
Yeah.
Yeah, unbelievable. Especially what he did, and they alluded to it in the show, that what he did with Tiger Mask. I think Ian has actually masturbated to some of that stuff.
Did you catch me that one time?
one time.
It's on our Patreon.
$5.
Yeah, but honestly, that stuff is masterful. As Jason, it was art, just unbelievable.
Yeah,
and it wasn't just with Tiger Mask. Like, pretty much any time the man was in the ring, he created magic.
With anybody, yeah.
Yeah, like between or as Jay would say, between the bells, the man was unbelievable. He really was.
Like when you think about it now, like the little things that we take for granted. We alluded to it on a show, didn't we, the other week? And Jay, you can come in after this. We alluded to the last the In Your House show, and we talk about some of the stuff that the modern kids do, and they're flipping over the top rope and they're doing this and they're putting their body on the line. Like, you look at some of the stuff he was doing on the outside, like those crossbodies from Tiger Mask onto him on the guardrail, like, and you're going, oh shit, you know what I mean? And those were those old big steel Japanese blue guardrails that had about you could literally fit a body through one of the gaps. But like, for example, a move like the superplex, that was Dynamite. Just literally was up there and went, oh, I need a move. Boom, let's do a superplex off the top rope onto Japanese rings, which are basically boxing rings. You know what I mean? Things like that. The suplex, as I said, always over the top rope, where both of them will go out to the outside. I mean, there's a level of skill in there to not break your back there right away. Even though it looks like you're gonna kill yourself. He was doing this as a skinny kid. And props again to young Tom and Mark. They can actually do that, which is incredible to see. Jay, I just wanted to add that in. Just something as simple as
you know what, you can narrow and define the parameters of genius. What is often misunderstood about somebody like this in any art which he picks up or chooses, the canvas is the right thing to call it when that man was between the ropes. I mean, art is not in the brush, art is in the hand, and the man was a master. To say that he forgive me if I run away with waxing lyrical, his work is not a certain match. His work is not a certain year in a certain part of the world. His work is fucking global. What he did with how little he had to do in time frame was terraformed the business from bell to bell, rope to rope, buckle to buckle, seat to seat, arena to arena, crowd to crowd, pay-per-view to pay-per-view, match to match, belt to belt, minute to minute. Exquisite. We talk about fucking superplexes. Fuck that noise. Let's reduce it to its most basic elements. When he punched, you believed he was punching. When he bounced off the ropes and came at you, it was like something was figuring out a way to defy gravity and you were in his way. Something as simple and as masterful and as beautiful as the snap suplex. It's fucking art. It's art. The understanding of pro wrestling between men, when I call it a dance, I mean no insult to it. It is the understanding of your own physical capabilities, gauging another man's physical encompassment, finding the pinnacle, the sweet spot, the nexus where gravity and balance marry and to topple and to make it look exquisite without hurting somebody. This is fucking majesty. It's majestic. It's not like anybody else had done it before him. There's certain men in this fields of entertainment who are touched with the exquisiteness needed to convey the seriousness and gravitas of the situation. Dynamite was literally like almost like the Jimi Hendrix of wrestling. You can't compare it to anything before it, and you can't compare it to anything after it, because when
Great
it happened,
analogy.
What happened before it didn't matter, and what happened after it was never going to be the same again.
Yep.
It's a once in a lifetime opportunity in a field of entertainment, and he was it. And again, you can look at the span of his career for when he was a fucking little lad in England, coming up and doing it and working young, eager and hard, and then transforming his body to whatever fucking field or whatever view, whatever audience wanted to see it. It's like taking a car. You can drive really fast in a normal street car, but when you take that into a garage, throw a fucking turbocharged engine in it, and it's just rig it for fucking hot rodding, you won't get 1,000 miles out of that. You'll get 200 miles. You'll get the quickest, fastest machine you've ever seen. But after that, it's done.
Yeah.
And with him, this is the problem. This is what people fail to understand. He gave his body to us as viewers at a detrimental cost to himself.
Yeah.
But what he did for it, what his sacrifice was, is what we consider apex art in this particular sport that we all love. He's the fucking Dynamite Kid. His name is whispered in reverence, even though his videos weren't all out there. We were all sitting around in the early days of fucking YouTube, bleary-eyed, watching grainy fucking footage from dark matches in Japan, going, I can still see what he's doing, even though the viewfinder can't pick him up. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? This is fucking hazy shit you're watching on the screen, and you're still glued in like it's a massive production. It's
true. Yeah, absolutely. And we get introduced obviously to Lance Storm at fairly early in the documentary, who comes on. I think he was he only had that small little piece on it, but I thought he beautifully put himself and Dynamite across in terms of the impact that he had on the business and how his work stands up even to this day. It's timeless and ageless, really, you know. I thought that was just a nice little piece where Lance Storm came in, because Lance Storm would have been heavily influenced by Dynamite Kid, obviously, in terms of how he worked, being another man who's like, if you want a small man in a big business, you know what I mean? So like it was interesting to have him there. Then they move in, obviously, and we get introduced obviously to Michelle and Bronwyn. And if you want to take that one up, obviously.
Yeah, like I knew, like I'm going to be honest, and Bronwyn gave me free permission and trust to basically speak kind of on her behalf on this one, just in terms of how she was feeling like before this and all that. And yeah, like, so 100% she was nervous as fucking. I was talking to her fella, shout out to Aaron, her partner. Yeah, like they were nervous in how it was going to come across, because they had told me like they actually didn't say a whole lot of negative. You know, they told the instances of negative that happened, but they said it wasn't like a constant thing throughout childhood and a constant thing throughout the marriage. So they wanted the producers of this show to get it across in the way.
Yeah, they informed, not sensationalized.
Yes, exactly. And they were, of course, they were nervous about, you know, about how the family in England would take it as well, because, you know, sometimes there can be, you know, are you trying to cash in or what? But to be honest with you, I thought, you know, these ladies were were telling their story, as they have the right to do so. If that gets me heat, fair enough. But at the end of the day, that is the truth. You know, they have the right to tell that story, and I would have much.
I think that's important here, Ian, as well, to mention that there's many truths in this old understanding that tell the truth. There's no one truth. Everybody has a truth.
That's exactly it. Because I mean, what would you have rather, the Dynamite Kid show with no family or no first-hand experience, and then you get a load of bitter old wrestlers coming in and just going to town. Do you know what I mean? Which we will talk about one of these fucking fuckwits that was on the show in a little while. I'm sure you'll bring me in on that, and I'll be happy to tear his head asunder. Yeah, I'll be ready for that one. But no, as far as Michelle, I thought they spoke very well. I thought they spoke very eloquently. They told the story with dignity. Not once did they just constantly put the man down. You could actually see the excitement in Michelle when she talked about how great a worker he was. You know what I mean? And even when Julie, Brett's ex-wife, was on talking about him, you know, it was just, you can tell they're all flabbergasted at how good this guy was in the ring, and just almost commanded respect because of his craft, you know. But yeah, it was very tough for Brahman and all that, but she's very, very happy with how it came out in the end, which we'll talk about at the end of the show. But I thought those two ladies spoke very well, and yeah, they told their stories. You know, it was nice to hear Brahman talk about, you know, hearing that, you know, he was such a good dad at the time and just wouldn't, you know, let them out of their sight when he was obviously around, and seeing her backstage with the Macho Man and Elizabeth, and she's talking about, you know, she said that on Dynamo's Dozen as well, how she just wanted to hang out with those two all the time. You know, they kind of took a shine to her. You know, it's like when you have like a million, it's like in Ireland, we all come from big families. You know, I probably have about 20 little cousins, but you always have the one that you kind of take the shine to.
It's very sweet to imagine that side of Macho as well. We've been so many sides of him. It's very sweet and humane to see it, just as a caveat, as a side notion. It's just,
and he loved kids. That's what she said. That, you know what I mean? He loved kids.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He didn't have any of his own, and he absolutely loved kids, and so did Liz. I mean, Liz just is a ray of light anyway. So yeah, it was nice to hear them talk, and it was, you know, you could tell she was nervous, but I thought she came across really well, you know, with those nerves, and
very dignified.
Very dignified. Yeah, both of them, and the youngest daughter as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Joe, then we get Mick Foley comes into the picture.
Oh Jesus!
Which I thought was absolutely brilliant because of the parallels there in terms of pushing the envelope and being injured and, you know, destroying yourself for the fans, you know. So the parallels were there. But I thought
very good point. I didn't think of that, Noel.
Yeah, but I thought it was beautiful the way he spoke about watching Dynamite's VHS tapes till they were broken. Like, he used to watch them over and over again. And then he dropped his Mount Rushmore, which I thought was beautiful. Funk, Brody, Flair, and Dynamite. This is Mount Rushmore. And I was thinking, there's no way I would have picked those four. Terry Funk probably because of the association, but I wouldn't have picked those four as.
Can't argue it though, can you?
No, absolutely not. But I thought it was beautiful the way he said it, like, and he said like he really revered this man. This man was unbelievable. Like, you know?
Excellent way of showing you where a fella's head's at, isn't it? When in regards to what he loves, watch out Rushmore. If you don't have four straight off the bat, you need to go home and take your love a little bit more seriously.
Yeah, absolutely. And then of course, Joe, if you want to take this, Dave Meltzer comes in, of course, and he starts talking about, you know, there'd be no Jushin Liger, of course, without Tiger Mask and Dynamite, which I thought, in fairness, in the last couple of episodes, Dave Meltzer has kind of won me over slightly a bit again in terms of these documentaries and his understanding and his history of them, you know.
Me too.
We move on then, of course, and we talk about, you know, he signs for WWE in 1984 with his cousin Davey Boy Smith, and we're off and running with the British Bulldogs, basically, you know. Joe, what was you thinking then? And obviously came in, started working Brad and Jim the Anvil. And
well, I think signing for the WWF was actually the beginning of his downfall, because I think that was really when they talk about wrestling in the land of the giants, but WWF in the 80s was seriously the land of the giants. And you can imagine, you know, Dynamite turning up there and going, how do I stick out in this? You know, one, I've got to work my bollocks off. Two, I've got to get jacked. You know what I mean? He had to get bigger, and he knew it. Like, and so and I can't remember who it was, but someone mentioned that he never enjoyed it in WWF.
Yeah.
They think. Who was it? One of the, was it the oh, I can't remember who it was actually that said it. But
no, someone did say it though. Yeah, you're right.
I don't think he was. They said I don't think he was ever happy there, and I can understand that because he put his body through torture to try and stick out. And
also a level of ego he'd probably never ran into in one locker room before.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, just he came from, that.
Still like the asshole farm where asshole trees grew. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Like he came from a quote unquote like shithole wrestling gym in Wigan, like the snake pit, and then he was in, the Heart Dungeon, and doing then he was with Stampede. Then he was in Japan working with smaller crowds. Then he comes to this just fucking literally a giant circus with giant human beings and giant egos.
It must have bothered him as well, though, when you consider all them other places he was in. When he walked in, they understood and appreciated his art. They got him. They were like, it doesn't matter what he's like as a person. Have you seen what he can do in the ring? Whereas when he gets to WWE, it's like, fuck you. I mean, okay, there may be only 3 belts in the company, but 80 champs sitting in the locker room all dissing you and just, well, can you throw a man 75 feet in the air above your head because you're jacked? No, well then shut up. That's what it is here. Whereas everybody else, it's, have you seen this, lad? Do you know what I mean? It's got to take the wind out of your sails. That particular locker room at that particular time was unlike any other place in the world. I mean, Vince was drawing in the best from all the territories who were coming in with their territory attitude where they wore the guy, and you've just got a room full of the guy. Do you know what I mean? It can't have been easy.
I wonder, as I listened to the documentary, did he ever let himself at any stage enjoy any part of his career? Or was it always that kind of uphill battle for him all the time, no matter where he was? Because I can't imagine him being the type of guy that would go out and put on a 5-star match and then go back to the locker room and go to your man. That was great, wasn't it? I think he was always looking to the next thing, the next innovation, the next mountain that he had to climb. He was looking at these giants, obviously, in the locker room and stuff like that. And those guys never really cared for that type of work at all. I can't imagine like Hulk Hogan walking over the Dynamite kid in the locker room and go, great match, kid. I just can't imagine it. You know what I mean? It just wouldn't happen.
Taking a compliment on a snap suplex off somebody who's never done one or even seen one in his matches.
Isn't that where Vince saw, like, when the Madison Square Garden match that he had with Tiger Mask? You remember when Dynamite was wearing the orange trunks?
Yeah.
And that was the famous one where Vince said, "I need that guy."
They used to say that was Vince's favorite match ever, even Vince up until recently.
A lot of people verified that. Yeah, I knew that for a long time. That Vince said the best wrestling match I've ever seen, and Dynamite said. That wasn't even our Japan stuff.
That probably played into it too as well when Vince is going around saying, "Oh, Dynamite, the greatest thing I've ever seen," and you got all these other men who he's been fucking shoehorning into one locker room going, "Well, really, I hate him." No.
I just that's what I kind of picked up on. That I wonder at any stage in his career did he ever enjoy it? And I know later on in the documentary it talks about how he used to sit there for hours watching his matches back again. So it was like as if he was reliving his life again and trying to find some solace or enjoyment in it or something like that he never had.
Validate him.
When he was in it. You know what I mean?
Well, Joe, just on your point, and you could probably back this up, like if you think about it, he was there technically, along with the Hart Foundation or whatever, for the start of this rock and wrestling thing. You know what I mean? So it wasn't like he was looking at it from elsewhere going, shit, I need to be a part of that. That's where the big money is. He was there from the start. So for him, his whole love for wrestling came from being able to go out, as Jay so elegantly put it earlier, and be the art, So it probably wouldn't have been that big of a deal other than the fact that it was bigger money, bigger crowds, going out and able to hang out with the boys. So for him, it wouldn't have been that big a deal versus where if you grew up now in this, that's the show you want to get to. So for him, that necessarily wasn't the show you want to get to. For him, it was like, where's the paycheck coming from? But I can guarantee you I'm going to earn this paycheck no matter where it is. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so it wasn't about the show. He felt he was the show.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He brought the show, basically, We move on then, and Foley talks about that match he had with him where he I think he broke his jaw or something like that.
I shouldn't be laughing, but we've been part of many matches like that back in the day, and I can't sit here and judge that. Yous can, but
but even Foley nearly speaks fondly of it, like it was a badge of honor. You know what I mean? That kind of thing.
So, listen, we often talk about what the jobbers went through back in the day, but you know what I mean? Put up against that. I mean, there's a hazing of somebody who doesn't have a second name in the business. You know what I mean? It's like, just send in Philip, will you? Boy, I need to smash something for this. These people want to see me.
I really thought it was the way Foley said he could see Dynamite on the edge going, oh, drag me in, fucking drag me in. It's like,
give me him.
Isn't it mad when we think about the career that Mick Foley's had, and we're talking about Mick Foley like as if he's Terry Gibbs or something like that? You know what I mean? It's crazy, like, you know.
But I mean, I guess maybe that's where the hardcore started from. I don't know.
It was fairly hardcore from the get-go.
You what, Joe?
Did Foley say that was only his second ever match or something?
He was new to it anyway.
Yeah, he said he was new enough, and he said what a wake-up call it was being in the ring with someone like Dynamite.
Like, can you imagine, you know, your second ever match or whatever it was, like, or maybe you only had a handful, and you're standing across from one of the best tag teams to ever walk the earth, like, you know what I mean? Jesus Christ!
Break my jaw, please. It's okay.
Yeah.
If I was
the end of it when you're full of eager.
If I was 350 matches into my career, the thoughts of taking a clothesline off the Dynamite Kid would still put the crap up me without a shadow of a doubt.
I just want to preface this by saying, and Joe was here to witness this, John Moss, who was obviously one of the big trainers in NXT, and Joe remembers this very well. I used to love that left-hand Dynamite clothesline where it was high up. Now, the trick to it was to get it high up here where you didn't hit the Adam's apple and you didn't hit the jaw. But I guess Dynamite's biceps were far bigger than mine. That's a fact.
Or he didn't care.
Yeah, or he didn't care. But I remember I used to try and get that all the time. And you remember there was a time where this guy kept getting me in the throat. And Joe remembers this well. And John Moss comes in and goes, oh, I'll show you how to do it. And John Moss is Dynamite Kid size. So I remember, and anyone that's met him, you have personally, Niall, as well.
Yeah.
When you basically get swung off the ropes and you're running for this clothesline and you see this big man coming back with those arms coming at you, and I swear, took the bump, I felt like I was hit by a beautiful cloud. It was lovely. It was so safe. But it could have been the opposite. Imagine it had been the opposite way. Boom.
He's just being full of bravado. He shit himself. He actually didn't remember what day it was for 6 weeks.
I raked myself.
Yeah. Don't be giving him a gun. I was like, he did nothing to me.
No, but he didn't know. No,
and he ate some canvas.
The compliment is to John Moss is that he barely touched me. That's the compliment. Yeah.
I thought. Go ahead, Jay.
It's again when I put into mind the Dynamite just wrecking Foley's jaw. I mean, I just there's two things that scream out to me. One, I have visions of, we all know when somebody starts something, right, and they're so fucking eager, and I can just see Foley going over at the end of match. Oh, it's a great match, it was brilliant. It's like, fuck off. And the second thing is, we've already been told, just to make it perfectly clear to anybody who thinks, oh, these assholes are somebody was blah blah blah. No, the business is a painful business, and you know, if somebody's new getting into the ring and they're fucking Johnny Johnston from Johnstontown City with the jacket and they're you know, and in any industry, you've got to haze hard early to make sure a man doesn't make a mistake in the rest of his life. And when new people are handed into you, it was done to Dynamite as well. It was spoke about during that shit, the snake pit.
Yes.
I mean, they go at you hard to make sure you have what you need to get through the business successfully without fucking, you know, crying your eyes out like that recent lad who quits every time he dislocates an elbow or a shoulder.
I'm really happy that you brought that point up, because obviously, Niall, you might probably crack over it later, but it's really a good point in when Michelle comes in and she says it, that Dynamite was from the time where you earned your stripes, you earned your
haze hard to make sure your steel is going to stand.
Yeah, and in
this is a business, this is an industry, and they are going to prop on you. They need to know they can depend on you when the shit gets hot and hard.
And up until the early 2000s, Joe can verify this. That's the way it was. You know what I mean?
It still is, whether people want to admit it or not.
Yeah, it was to weed out people that either wanted it or didn't. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? And
If somebody's not up to being a fireman, there's a reason they train so hard and heavy for fucking 6 to 8 bleeding weeks or months or whatever. They need to know when it's go time, you can go and take care of business. This isn't men brutalizing each other for a couple of quid. I mean,
No.
Mick Foley kept going and we seen where he went to. And clearly a dislocated jaw didn't put him off. You know, this isn't people being cruel or being nasty
No.
to each other.
No.
You know,
100%.
it's just a very funny story, but we're not laughing at the tragedy or the misery or the pain of one man getting fucking smashed.
I mean,
well,
when you
I am
look
a little bit.
You know, I love when people, you know, when internet warriors, keyboard warriors, whatever, that don't even have a clue about Dynamite Kid other than maybe a tribute video that they watched, and then they've read some stories from fucking idiots and go, oh, he was such a bully in the ring and he done this and blah, blah, blah. You go back and watch Stampede stuff where he's getting the shit kicked out of him as well by Bad News Brown. And the two of them are smiling at each other going, yeah, bring it, come on. So that's the background that they came from. So Dynamite got as good as he got too. So
it's across the industry as well, Ian.
Exactly.
You know, when you go to another territory, the way them old territory boys did and they hopped from country to country, I mean, you've got Stan Hansen popping people's eyeballs out of their head and stuff like that. You need the when you're sent to another country to make a lot of money and a lot of people are depending on you to be able to succeed in the business. There's a time and a place. If you want to be an amateur at something, go do it for fucking free.
Yeah.
If you want to be a professional, there's a reason that you train till you puke and then you do 2 hours more. It's to build your fucking stamina, integrity, and make sure the business and the life you choose is for you. Because if it's not a fucking hobby. Fuck off.
Well, Stampede, we know Stampede was basically nearly a shoot as opposed to.
Well, I'll give you a funny story. I remember telling Joe this story years ago because I loaned the book to Joe years ago. I'm sure he read it, but we all know Joe's memory isn't great. But he's the one that says it all the time.
Is
but
it?
No, there was a story where Bad News Brown. He was telling the story where Bad News Brown basically they were doing a street fight, and Bad News Brown basically had hacksaws 2x4. It wasn't obviously hacksaws, but he had a 2x4, and he said to Dynamite beforehand, he goes, just know that I'm swinging that as hard as I can. So if you don't duck, you know, your death isn't on me.
No problem, yeah.
And Dynamite was like, all right. So you had to know when the time was to fucking duck.
Yeah.
And there's actually a video excerpt.
Be with me in there.
Exactly. Yeah. Keep the eye contact all the time. And that's what it is. It's eye contact. Even though you're not looking directly at each other all the time, you are looking directly at each other all the time. And no one went to miss a beat. But so that was the way it was back then. You're 100% right. Anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. I like the parallels after that when they talk about you know, they go through Foley and the broken jaw and you know how hard that was. And then it goes back to the absolutely.
Fuck him.
He obviously didn't watch the Bad News Brown Street Fighter. He would have known better.
Yeah. John Foley.
He was a fan. He should have got his jaw signed.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, can you sell your jaw on eBay?
The mandible.
Sell anything on eBay.
Yeah. It goes back to Dynamite's daughters, and they're showing some of his ring gear and some of his figures and all. So you're still seeing that kind of not only love, but sort of fandom there through the family that they revered him in terms of, you know, his accomplishments in the business, if you like, you know.
I've already told Brahman that there will be a picture one day of me with that on, but it won't be seen because it is the British flag. So
we'll get to that.
I just want to wind Jay up there.
We'll get to that. Another thing.
I just wanted to wind Jay up. I'm sorry. I'm
teasing. We'll get to that. Don't worry about that.
This is where what we call in these documentaries, we take a sharp turn to the left. This is where we start getting into now the ribbing and all that kind of stuff that's at an absolute different level. These boys, we've often spoken about Fuji and guys like that. These guys were different level.
Oh no, Fuji was still the worst. Fuji was still the worst.
Was he though?
Yeah. Fuji was the one. Fuji was the one with them directing fucking traffic. Trust me.
Only one man is still feared in death.
Yeah.
Fuji was the
trust me on this. This documentary might have a lot to say, but it doesn't have all the answers. Fuji was directed. Fuji and Kurt Hennig.
You don't start calling him Fuji-san, he's going to come after you in your sleep.
Yeah.
This is where you
Exactly.
take out the British Bulldogs VHS, and at the bottom has produced by Mr. Fuge.
and co-produced by Kurt Hennig.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was just they alluded to some of the stuff that the boys did. Good Lord. Like, good.
You know, I'm going to sound like a heartless fucker here, and it is what it is, but it's true. At that time, if I'm putting myself back in that time, because I can put myself back in the time in 2000, when that kid, your man that they fucking halcyomed and basically shit in his bag and all that, he came in, he was a loudmouth and, you know, thought he was the fucking the shit. I've heard Terry Taylor talk about how Dynamite fucking used to rip his shirts up because he was a loudmouth as well, and then all of a sudden he was like sitting in the corner, not being a loudmouth anymore. In a lot of ways, it's kind of like, you know, it's weird, isn't it weird the way he called Michelle? I don't know whether we skipped over that, but that bit was actually very emotional when Michelle was reading out the letter. Yeah. And it showed the different sides of Dynamite, you know, the loving side, you know, how I'm going to give you everything, blah, 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 love your little yard dog. And it's kind of like what Dynamite almost was. He was the little Jack Russell going around.
He was a jacker, no question.
Yeah. Without a doubt, a jacker going around going, ooh, I'm going to keep you in check. I'm going to keep you in check. So this kind of halcyon thing, and don't forget, back then, there wasn't the education on drugs and pain pills and you know, steroids that there is now. So they probably thought it was all fun. They weren't trying to murder someone. They probably thought it was fun. Do you know what I mean? I can say that there's
I don't know. Mick Foley's jaw would say differently if I could speak.
But I'm talking about the education on drugs. Although, Jay, in fairness, it was still like a lot of them were, you know, everyone was on
the 80s, not the 20s.
Yeah, but everyone was cocaine. Yeah, but still halcyons and stuff like that. I mean, look, I was
we had medical science.
There was pills dropped in my fucking drinks many a time back in the day, and it was actually fucking hilarious. I found the funny side personally, and got my own back too. But
it depends on how shit their dealer's product was. Yeah. It's been happened to me a few times, and it was wonderful.
The point I'm making there is
other times not so often.
The point I'm making is you can see there automatically what their thing is. They're going to be the locker room. Him and Davey are going to be the locker room yard dogs. You know what I mean? This guy's been a mouth. We're going to teach him a lesson kind of deal. Blah, blah, blah. Now, that doesn't mean he went off and fucked off and basically was on the verge of bleeding, thinking the mafia were after him or something. That's his own kind of deal. I'm not saying that anyone deserves that, but I'm just saying that there were different times and kind of what they probably seen as fucking harmless fun, blah, blah, blah. I mean, they all halcyoned each other. Fucking, what's his name? Big Dave, fucking, oh, good Lord, his name has just escaped me now. His mate with the bald head.
Dan Spivey.
Dan Spivey. I mean, Dan Spivey fucked Dynamite up, which they talk about it as well. Gave him some sort of gimmick where he thought he was going to die in his gaff, like, you know what I mean? They didn't know what they were giving each other.
I don't know. I think that's a very easy backdoor out of that. I mean, they wouldn't have done it to Hawk or Animal.
Well, I think they would. I don't think think Dynamite so. and I listen. I think Dynamite against
I don't think so.
In a straightener, I think there's only one winner. I think they know that too.
I'd like to see it.
I'm sure they didn't want to see it.
That's a pay-per-view we will definitely buy. We pay for that one.
There were two big loud men, but
no, I will interject. I don't see anything right about that level of hazing, and whether it was the 80s or whether they felt it was good or funny or not. Again, bullying is never good in any respect. And when you're picking some guy to run him out of the locker room in his chosen industry, when you know you've got a few men behind you and you also know that you can take care of yourself, that was bullshit. That was bollocks. I don't care how much mouth he was running. That level of shit. I mean, it's one thing to feed a fella's dog. It's another thing to make him crap himself and cut up his shorts. You know?
The fifth. Go ahead, Noel.
Then Michelle comes on and she obviously starts to talk about how in the early days and stuff, for the first 4 or 5 years, everything was fine. He wasn't like this. And then it all started after the back operation, which obviously must have been very difficult for the man as well in terms of his mindset of how he wanted to work and perform. Obviously was affected by this, and we know what Dynamite, it was 100% or it was nothing. You know what I mean? That's his mindset was.
When they were talking about when he was basically, you know, lying on the floor, like, and they could hear him basically almost squealing. You know what I mean? Like that level of pain must have been fucking, you know, absolutely excruciating. Like, and in America, it was so easy to just get a pill for it. You know, drink it down with alcohol, you'd be grand.
Absolutely. Then she talks about obviously the marriage ran into difficulty and stuff like that. And she talks about the night they went out for dinner to have a few drinks, and she didn't want to drink, but she didn't want to let him know. And she was drinking tonic water. He tasted the drink and he went absolutely ballistic and drove home like a madman, playing chicken on the way home and all this kind of thing. They had a row. She ended up sleeping in the closet, all this kind of stuff. This where we start to see the darkness of the dark side of the ring kicking in a little bit, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Then we move on to this whole thing where we talk about the Bulldogs and the Rougeaus, and how it occurred and stuff like that. And when I was listening to this whole Rougeau thing, do you know what jumped into my mind? And it's really weird. There's a part in Back to the Future where Doc Brown says to Marty McFly, when he goes back to the future, if you like, or back in time, he says, don't interact because you'll change history. And I thought that this was one of those pivotal moments in terms of what happened in that whole situation, and the impact of it. And you talk about the letter and Dino Bravo and the threat of the mafia, and them staying at home fearing for their life and having to sell the family home and move on.
It was a chain of consequences off one instance.
Absolutely. That changed the spectrum of their lives forever. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Ian, do you want to come in on this? Because I know you have strong thoughts on this big time. So come in and
fucking absolutely I do. As a fan growing up, I'd read the stories and kind of put two and two together, and I was listening to different sides. The Rougeaus never seemed to have much backup on it, other than the likes of a few YouTubers that like to make a quick buck out of it without mentioning names, and like to have him on, give him his fucking 2 cents worth. But by all accounts, there was a reason that the whole locker room were pretty much on the Bulldog side and there was nobody on the Rougeau side, is because they all knew that the two of them were fucking mouths. They'd laugh at people and speak in French. Well, they were all going, what the fuck is this? You know what I mean? That's like going into any office environment if there's a language we can't speak and they're going, blah, blah, blah.
An arrogant French speaker?
Arrogant French, yeah. And of all, French Canadian as well, which is even worse. So they come in and, he tries to portray, we were big fans of the Bulldogs. It was an honor to be there, blah, blah, blah. And you could tell Kurt Hennig, for one, did not like these two boys. You know what I mean? Mr. Bleeding Golden Gloves with his bum leg. Like, I heard Bret Hart saying, he goes, even with a brand new leg, he still would have got the head kicked off him. So this was the thing where the Bulldogs were obviously known as ribbers. They cut the legs off pants and stuff like that. So that kind of stuff, even though it's fucking infuriating, it's still harmless. You know what I mean? You're not going to lose your life over it. Now, Rougeau makes a point in this, which I think he fucks himself up. And this shows the kind of sadistic evilness in this man, in my opinion. He says, it's not funny when, you're 25 days on the road. It's not funny when you're doing this. Yeah, it's a joke. He made a joke where a whole family was affected because he says he made up this fake name and he starts laughing. Oh, it's so very funny that you say that. And he thinks it's great. That affected a whole family. He got slapped because that was coming, because basically they were mouthing off to the boys and mouthing off saying that they were going to tell Vince this. He got slapped around. That was it. He didn't hit the man with the bum leg and said, all right, when your leg's ready, come see me and then I'll beat you up. So this bothers me a lot because he says that he made up this bum name. Brahman had no problem telling me this. It was a legitimate thing. They did have ties to the French Canadian mafia. Vince knew this as well, because that's where the real story was. Vince was the one that said, I'm just giving you guys advice as well. This is because he obviously went to Vince after Dino had stooged. You know what I mean?
Well, I think you understand how the gravitas of the situation when Vince is getting involved in locker room ribbing to begin with. You never really hear of his name or his hand directly in any of the japery or the bullshit.
And
the fact that the big man has come down from his office and interjected into it. It was like,
and that was genuine. It was from Stu as well, because obviously Vince has obviously a lot of respect and love for Stu, but he had said it also to the Bulldogs lads, don't retaliate. They do have connections there. The father and all has connections there. So, I mean, this supposed rib that Jack Rougeaus seems to find so funny, basically broke up a family and put a family in danger. So, fuck Jack Rougeau. I think anyone that gets him on a podcast or fucking anything like that, I think he could go fuck himself. I wouldn't even take him for if he paid me personally on a podcast.
I think he approaches it as it was an incident in time, and he kind of washes himself of the responsibility or the knock-on effect of what happened, the consequences.
He's still a pussy that either way. He's still a pussy that needed a weapon. Whether it's a roll of quarters, whether it was
regardless
of what it was, exactly.
You're right. He accepts the celebrity of the situation without the culpability of the consequences following it. You can't have one hand dirty and one hand clean.
No,
you either accept everything or you didn't do it. There's no 1 foot in, 1 foot out.
Yep.
I thought, watching this show, lads, I thought Jacques Rougeau came across really well initially.
Initially, I agree.
Came across really well. He talked about that he was a bit of a dick and a loudmouth and was afraid of Dynamite Kid because he was a bit of an animal. And I was like, Jesus, I'm actually surprised this guy's coming across well. But then, as you said, he fucked himself up when he talked about when he started laughing about the whole, name thing. I was just like, oh wait, no, it was almost like the show itself, where it started out okay, and then took, as Noel said, took a sharp left turn. And I was like, oh, this guy's actually a complete asshole.
He showed a different
side. All right.
He showed his true side. That's
exactly. But just up to that, I thought he came across quite well. And then the next thing I was like, oh no,
you know what, Joe? There was
the thing is,
sorry.
Yeah, because he knew what the avalanche that small snowball ended up creating, and he's sitting there laughing about it. And I was like, oh no, he's actually an asshole. Like I was duped by him.
Yeah, but
he's a very convincing actor.
He's a charmer. That's the thing. He's very charming. And in fairness, I was even at the same time, I was like, maybe Ray Rougeau will come out and say, like, look, rest in peace, Dynamite. Didn't mean to take it that far, blah, blah, blah. You got a few slaps in the locker room. I think Michelle said that. You got beaten up in the locker room for whatever. It was a receipt.
It would have been a great opportunity to put it all to bed and just look. It got out of hand. I'm an older man now. Back in the day, you got to understand the locker room being what it is. I behaved like an ass, and even I've again. Bits of this story always come up everywhere, and I listened to the Cornette review of the situation.
Yeah, me too.
It came up. Even Jim came up and said, "Well, apparently, what happened," and I hadn't heard this side of it, was that it was actually fucking one of Perfect's ribs on.
It was 100%. Yeah.
Dynamite. So it was two parties being manipulated by another fellow, which is Perfect himself.
No, Jay, you're 100% correct. Yeah. It was actually Piper that went over and he put locks on the Rougeaus' bags. And the reason they used to do that was because you probably heard that too. The Rougeaus used to get preferential treatment where they would get the early flight. So they'd get the match on early so that they could get home for the weekend.
Go home. Yeah.
And the boys were saying...
The Golden Boys, yeah.
Yeah, so they were like, these two fuckers get to go home all the time and see their family.
We roadkill and sleep in a van with fucking Kamala while this prick goes home to his bed.
Yeah, you know what I mean? So,
and in Dynamite's eyes as well, getting preferential treatment like that when you haven't earned it the way he talks about coming up in the business with that hard track, he had no time for that at all. Like, that was not in his...
There was also probably a latent fucking... animosity there to begin with already, which made it almost a perfect storm for the boys to put these two together. You had the Stampede Calgary end of things, and then the French speaking Quebec end of things, and these would have obviously at some stage, wrestling being what it is, rival territories in the business, so it could have been a 20-year, 40, 60-year animosity, the men standing over looking at each other. You know what I mean? And we're all in under this one marquee tent with this guy just sweeping up all the best from all the territories, and them two already having their swagger from each other, just staring out at each other, and you've got fucking Perfect and Piper sitting there going...
You know what? I just want to put some because again, this is a review of the documentary, but there's certain elements and stuff that weren't portrayed. The little weasel that he is, he turned around in one of Hannibal's shoots as well and turned around and said, the worst part about it was that all the boys that did, Pat Patterson was there going, oh, what the fuck? You know, because people thought Pat Patterson was involved. He was like, no, absolutely not. He waited until all the boys weren't there because they were going to be killed by Bad News Brown and Jim the Anvil. And I believe
apparently everyone, you look, when
everyone.
you leave fucking lunatics like Ultimate Warrior and fucking
Yeah.
Billy Jack Haynes, all of them taking Dynamite's side.
Yeah. And that
it's
was
one
the
thing
thing.
to have history and logic, but when you've got actual Lulas going, you know, we're with them. Fuck
but when
them.
the bit that they left out was that Jacques Rougeaus left out, because he says it on and has said it on earlier podcasts. He said, I was hitting him with everything I got and the motherfucker didn't go down. 4 of his teeth were there and he was still hanging on to Rougeaus' tights going, come on, you fuck. Like, that is just a level of toughness that you fucking...
Also, my whole it was a roll of quarters. I think there might be something to what Spivey said about the Knucks.
I believe so. Yeah.
You put them, even Mike Tyson wouldn't put 40 or fucking teeth out in one solid swing. There's something there.
And this little bitch is meant to have done it because he learned how to punch on a mattress for a week because his fucking brother Ray was doing it.
And those two don't even talk right now, do they? Those two hate each other.
Yeah, well, it says a lot about them too, doesn't it?
It also came across in the documentary that this whole situation didn't sit well with Raymond at all.
No,
because if you hear when he says,
"Oh no, Raymond was a big part of it."
Remember when he talks about how I went up to Raymond and I told him now is the time to do this, boom, 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 and Raymond turned around and said, "Well, right now." You know, he was kind of a bit shocked that this was evolving and about to happen.
I know Ray was as big a part of it as well, because Ray also got jobbed out that day because Ray had the leg excuse, and Brett alluded to that on his Dynamite Kid documentary, and he said, yeah, Ray was a tough guy and he was a Golden Glove boxer up in Montreal. He goes, but Dynamite was a different level of toughness, you know what I mean? Which obviously it goes into later. Like I doubt Ray would have been bare knuckle boxing.
It just goes to show you though the levels of, again, fucking individual situations that went into this one particular incident, which toppled all the dominoes. You've got 2 men from territories from back long ago in an instance in a federation where 2 other men have just interjected themselves into this kind of under the water seething kind of, well, fuck you, no fuck you, no fuck you, but we can't say fuck you here. Okay, so we'll all just go and do business. And then you got the boys fucking ribbing these 2 factions who are just, you know, tender hooks. They're ready to go. There's already a powder keg there waiting for a spark. And it just took 2 mischievous bastards. I think this is why the sub-consequences of an action will never really be seen as kind of, okay, that was just a little bit funny. You never know the layers behind the situation that's already there. There's no small incident. There's a catalyst. I mean, a spark can set a fucking tire fire off, which will burn a city down. There's no innocence. You know what I mean?
That's what I was going to say.
This is a huge incident. There's so many factors in it.
That's what I was going to say. And one of the most important incidents on this is that, like, obviously Dynamite being who he was obviously going to get a receipt on that. That was never going to be left alone. That was going to be like, right, I'm going to fight the 2 brothers and I'm going to get my own back, and that's it. And where does it end? But the problem with this particular one is because the 2 pussies decided to use the mafia ties and threaten a family. Spare a thought for the actual family.
Yeah, they wanted no receipt for their consequences.
Yeah.
They didn't want it.
Yeah.
I mean, and there's also an aspect of me, Ian, from a perfectly neutral perspective that says, if I'm Jacques and fucking Frere or whatever the poxy names were, I don't want Dynamite coming at me for revenge. I don't want that. If we have to threaten him with Holy God himself, I'm like, yeah, well, my good friend is Jesus Christ. You might have heard of him. He died on the cross 2,000 years ago, and he's going to get you. Do you know what I mean? I'm going to bring a little something. I'm going to bring a bigger dick to the table, because I've just smashed somebody's teeth out with what was allegedly a roll of quarters. Bollocks, a handful of fucking dollars did that to a man's face. And they already knew, assaulting a fella in a locker room in his place of work when all of the boys already have his back to begin with. No good can come of that physically for you as a person. So the coward says, well, do you know what? I'll get the rar after you. How about that?
The worst part about it was for Bronwyn and Michelle is that they lost their dad, they lost a husband because of this incident. And that's really what the long-term part of it is. Forget about bravado and pride and all this thing. This is really what set the And like I know from, being we all are, being proud men, if someone does one on you, even if it's in a joking sense, you want to get them back in whatever way it is. There's a receipt coming. So
if it kills me, it'll happen.
Yeah. So imagine like the frustration also going on in this man's head, and then the anger building from this.
Yeah.
You're not physically allowed because you care too much about what you have here, which is your real life, your family home, the future you're trying to build. And then,
listen, and a man like him and who he was and his mental state and that, and going through the hazing to get to where he was in his career, to the level, and that this is the pinnacle that he's always pushed for. And I don't mean that from a wrestling perspective.
No, of course.
Finally get some fucking wages for what he's already done. He's getting money for what he's earned behind him. And the man that he is, and the level of perfection in his business that he is, and the amount of armor, muscle was the corporate suit of that trade at the time. And we already know right now the chemical imbalances are fucking juicing up to get to that size, to almost double your physical mass on a skeletal frame, which was biologically built to carry said amount of flesh. To be rendered impotent by your boss, the fucking locker room, the French mafia, if such a thing ever existed, and then to be embarrassed, we all have it. We're males. It's inherent in us. It's what got the family fed when we were fucking breaking out of the caves, where we left our females to look after fire. It's hardwired into our genetic coding to revenge, get back, do not be seen as weak in an industry where strength is everything. To have all that taken away from him, I can only imagine what the detrimental effect mentally was. I'm not making excuses for any of his shitty behavior. Every man must put his hand up at the end of the day to say, I own my shit. But I can only imagine and sympathize with him. You're not getting revenge for that. Fuck, I amn't. You're not. Fuck, I amn't. Do you know what I mean? I can only imagine the psychological detriment.
Well, I suppose in any situation like this, someone eventually has to swallow a comeback that doesn't happen. Otherwise, it ends in like a double tragedy or something like that, So
one of Taker's 45s in the locker room.
So Dynamite obviously moves out of WWE, career ends there, and he moves off, goes back to Japan where he feels obviously more at home, if you like. But it's fair to say, I think Julie alludes to the fact that although he was still putting on very good matches over in Japan, he was really inside. He was a wreck, really, and the level of pills and drink was kicking in, and he's diving deeper into this situation,
Brett said it in his book. I'd like to bring this up because I had that there as well. Brett said in his book that he called Brett out shortly after that, and I think it's around the same time. And Brett had to go over and say, look, dude, what the fuck is happening? Do you know what I mean? Because they were tight, obviously. And he said it was the first time he ever saw a Dynamite kid break down and cry, you know what I mean? And just say, I've lost everything, mate. I've lost it, like, you know what I mean? So there was emotion behind it. And for anyone that's read the Brett book, you probably remember that particular bit, Noel. Yeah. He said he just put his head on the steering wheel and just started bawling. He was like, mate, I can't work. I can't do this for much longer. You know what I mean? But I'm going to keep going. Yeah. So, I mean, it was a very, very sad situation.
Yeah, he was really, at that stage, he was fighting a losing battle, really, to try and continue what he perceived as being the desire of what he wanted and to offer up, but it just wasn't there anymore.
His body was beginning to betray him.
Yes.
And he just didn't know how to cope with it, because as Ian said, like, he was as hard as fucking nails, like, you know what I mean? And he was a different level of toughness in that. And also back then, lads, no one talked about how they felt, and in that, especially in a macho world like that, even today, a lot of quote unquote macho guys find it, almost impossible to talk about how they feel. Yeah. So, it must have been absolute torture for the man about what was going on with him.
Yeah, and especially for a guy like Dynamite, you can imagine if you were going through a lot of emotional stuff, he'd probably be the guy that you'd look to go and talk to. And if he's the guy that's in that situation, who does he go to? You know what I mean?
Yeah, a victim of his own masculinity.
Yeah, he's revered as being the guy in terms of, this is the hard bastard, really. You know what I mean?
You're the best. I'm not. I'm a human.
Yeah, he can't walk into perfect and go, I'm having a real bad day today. what? That ain't happening.
I'm just not into it.
Yeah. But then
I've seen a puppy and I wanted to cry.
Yeah, but then this is where we really get into the bones of the tragedy, if you like. Michelle tells a story of ringing in 1991, and he comes home with a bloody face. His daughters are freaked out by it, and she basically tells him to leave and go home to England. And he drags her by the hair, all this sort of stuff, and pulls a gun on her. And it doesn't get any sort of, like, Ian, it doesn't get any worse than that, really, does it?
No, can't make fan or no fan. There's no excuse for that. But you're looking at the breakdown of a man going into the abyss of his own mental health. Not only is his body breaking down, but his mental health is breaking down too. You know, at this particular time, it's sad. You know what I mean? And it's sad that kids have to see this type of thing. I wouldn't care if it was, you know, my own father, who's my hero, for seeing that, like, there's a flaw there in that particular incident. You know, I think people have thought of this incident, and I just wanted to say this as well, because Michelle kind of did say this, and Michelle will be on Dynamo's Dozen as well, guys, which will be a very, very interesting talk. But, you know, these weren't regular occurrence, but like once is enough. Do you know what I mean? With this type of situation. So I want to say that.
Once is too many, really.
Once is too many. Yeah, exactly. When it comes to that, but I think this is shortly after the incident where we mentioned earlier, where he went out to Brett and broke down and just said, "I'm fucking losing it." You know, I don't know what to do. And I think from that day on, when he did, you know, eventually go back to the United Kingdom, he decided to just never speak about it again. And I think that's obviously where we're going to go with the rest of the show, obviously, after that. But yeah, I mean, that incident is just, it's tragic. I mean, the only kind of saving grace is that, you know, he was obviously just such anger, but obviously there was something in the back of that mind, the goodness that was in there, that just said, I'm not going to actually do it. You know what I mean? It was like, how dare, that's a real, like, this is my kind of house, how dare you fucking tell me to leave my house kind of situation, you fucking leave. And
the bitterness had taken hold.
Yeah.
Like, he was bitter. There's no question about it. I mean, there's no way of sugarcoating it. And
how could you not be?
No. Yeah. And you can punch as many strangers as you want in the face in the bar when you're drinking. There'll never be any comeback from it. Nobody's going to come near you when you're built like that and you're angry. The only people who are ever going to suffer any real long-term serious fucking trauma from what bitterness can do to a man when it consumes him entirely. I mean, there's a time and a point when masculinity becomes toxic, and there's this level of frustration and rage that there's no vent or outlet for, particularly in the time. And I'm not making excuses for anybody, but the only people who suffer when you get to that point is those who love you and have your back. Yeah, and that's when it's gone.
You always take it out on the ones you love, isn't that?
It's fucking ground zero. It is, because they're the only ones who you wake up to the next day after you've been a shy bag.
Yep.
And you can't say sorry, but you can't stop either. And this tragedy is common again. Our sex is suffering, and it has done for the last 20 years. And not to make this about any current political situations, it's been a long time coming. And unfortunately, the only people who can help men who are that bitter and twisted in themselves is those who love them. And when those who love them have no more time or patience or energy to help them, it becomes a completely different situation. You can only do one or two things: apologize, stand up and own your shit, or run and hide. Those are your two options.
Yeah, I mean, I think in this situation, I don't, you know, Michelle basically said, look, this isn't working out. It's not good for you to be around us anymore, ever. Do you know what I mean? Because they obviously had felt that there was a case.
Serious respect for that lady for standing up for herself and her kids. Yeah. You've no idea the guts and balls that shit takes.
And still doesn't speak ill too badly, which we'll get into. But I think this is obviously with the next show that we're going to talk about, it's going to be a different story. It's like one kind of did obviously see a little bit of sense and went, right, I'm out of here. I'm better off just go leave them to it. They're better off without me, kind of thing. You know what I mean? So obviously something in the head is saying, I'm better off out of the situation.
And just as well.
Yeah.
Because that could have been a way worse tragedy when you think about it.
Well, when I think about it now, to be honest with you, and when I talk to them about it, you know, the vibe I get from Michelle is that it never would have went to that. You know what I mean? They don't think that he would have had that in him to just kill them. You know what I mean? And I want to say that because
that's the farthest extreme. You can perpetrate projected terror in small doses for a long protracted period of time by leaning heavily on those who love you and knowing how to manipulate their sympathies for you to stay in the situation to continue to be a fucking monster. Look, again, she had the strength to tell him to leave, and he had the wherewithal to know it was time to fucking go. And it's as simple as that. That's what happened. You know what I mean? It could have been a lot worse, but it doesn't have to go to the nth degree. Sometimes a protracted torture over a long period of time is way worse than finality, for want of a better word.
Well, yeah.
Then Dan Spivey comes on and he talks about how Dynamite went home to England and started getting involved in garage fights and bare knuckle fighting and all this kind of stuff. But
never heard of any of that shit.
Yeah, but he was asked,
something I had never even known about, Jay, believe it or not.
Never heard of it. Never even.
Not surprised by it though.
No.
And weird to hear out of Spivey's mouth. That's an intense looking son of a bitch. Hollywood needs to scoop him up.
Dan Spivey, as Dynamite said himself, is probably the toughest man.
But they asked Spivey, did Dynamite ever mention the family? And he said no, he never mentioned it because he would have seen that as being a sign of weakness. You know, which is just imagine that. Just imagine that mindset. Like, you know,
imagine the internal battle as well, though. Just going like,
curled up inside, curled up like.
Curled.
So 1996, he returns to New Japan to have a match, and this is very, very sad. This is where you see an absolute shadow.
Never seen it, and I don't think I ever will.
Yeah.
He was an absolute shadow of his former self. He'd aged God knows how many years as well. It was heartbreaking, and it's a pity that he did come back at all, really, because that was
yeah. Like I had actually learned that obviously through Power Slam. Shout out to Finlay Martin. I'd learned that he had a comeback match in 1996 from reading the mags back in the day, but I'd never ever managed to get my hands on the tape. But I do know in the world of wrestling that was a really fucking, really, really hard tape to get a hold of. And obviously when Jay mentioned when YouTube came out, you'd see excerpts and you'd also see like pictures of it. And you were going, wow, this is not the same man. Now, if you just saw the man walking down the street, you wouldn't think anything. You know what I mean? But Rachel was sitting with me and she goes, oh my God, that's the same guy, like.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah. So I'm going to give you, Michelle verified this. Dynamite said in his book as well, the heaviest he could get to naturally was 180 pounds at 5'8". At his heaviest, he walked around at 5'8" at 240 pounds. So do the math on that.
And not a lick of fat on him. He was
and that's how much. That's him. Yeah, but he's naturally, like, if you look at someone like Dynamite, he'd be naturally someone like me or Jay's size. You know what I mean?
Yeah, a walk around normal average male. I mean,
and that's what Rachel said. But that's what Rachel said. She goes, "You look," because she's just looking at it logically because she's not a big wrestling fan. She goes, "So that's his natural frame." And I said, "Yeah, that's it." And it lends itself to what Jay said earlier about the car analogy.
Yes, that was a 69 Charger turbocharged engine in a Mini Cooper frame.
Yeah,
you're not going to get a lifetime's mileage when you run something that big in a chassis that isn't built to fucking carry it. And I'd like to put another thing into perspective as well. Another thing that I've long believed to be bullshit about pro wrestling, which Dynamite, for me personally, set the compass on and made the whole industry better. Only about 10 to 12% of the world's population is over 6 foot tall. Like the unrealistic expectations we have of athletes in our chosen profession of love is preposterous. It's preposterous. I mean, some of the greatest wrestlers never got to get in between the ropes simply because America's fascination with fucking giants. It's a freak show at times. And when little men are allowed to do it and do it right, It's him at his peak. You know.
Great point. Glad you brought that up, Jay.
Yes.
Yeah. This is then it moves on to it talks about how, he was kind of, doctors alluded to the fact that they couldn't operate on the back anymore because of the scar tissue, and he ended up in a wheelchair, and he was kind of isolated. And of course, we know with the business, the way the business, once you end up in that situation, you're kind of forgotten out of sight, out of mind, very isolated. Not a great place to be if you're in that kind of mindset with those kind of issues going on, and trying to adjust to that situation on your own. Horrible to be in that position. But Michelle says that she still loved him and she felt sad for him, which I thought was a really nice thing to say. But she had to put that separation between them. She couldn't deal with everything that was going on, obviously mentally and stuff like that with the guy, which I thought was, must have been so tough on her, The daughters also mentioned as well that she never spoke negatively about the man, which I think is absolutely amazing in terms of the strength of the character, because when you hear about what actually happened and stuff like that, to be able to box that off and go, that's a different situation, and mainly protecting the daughters as well, it shows the strength and the depth and the character of the woman, which is outstanding,
Yeah.
Well, I think what we're getting into here is that there wasn't a whole, like we said, this wasn't a running thing for years and years of abuse that we see in certain abusive households. This was something that seemed to be almost kind of nipped in the bud as it was getting there. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think yeah, it was very. I mean, I thought Amara's talking. She'd never met him. That was very powerful, actually.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Very tough.
Very powerful. Tough.
Yeah. Then they go on and talk. Obviously, as far as the girls were concerned, he was an absolute prince. And then, of course, the tragedy of the Chris Benoit tragedy happens, and then Michelle is invited onto national TV over there to talk, and she kind of, just her opportunity to sort of it's nearly like a counseling session where she's given the opportunity to talk about everything finally, you know what I mean?
And then Dynamite Kid became the villain, even though he didn't fucking shoot anybody.
Yeah, absolutely.
But even that, there's an interesting item there going forward with this business and this sport. I mean, what we do with this as fans has consequences, and I think it's wonderful that the women of the men that we honor and revere are finally getting to speak about the consequences of what we do with this does to them and their home life. We heard the strength.
Obviously the Warrior. We heard the Warrior's ex. We heard obviously Brett's ex-wife talking about it. We heard other men. These guys that we think are just up here on the pedestal.
Yeah. The gritty, ugly home truth. I mean, at the end of the day, what I took from
human.
From her speaking, what I took was, I mean, she had the strength to pick up an industry, turn around and said she had the strength to pick up her family and survive. That's incredible. That's fucking incredible. You know what I mean? There'll never be a belt put around her waist for what she did. But Jesus Christ.
I would agree with that. And as I say, I just want to kind of also say that as well, because she mentions, I'm sure you're going to get into that, Noel, and she says, fair play to Dynamite for manning up and doing what I wanted from him,
Yeah.
And he did, and I'd say, as you mentioned earlier, did he ever speak about his family? No, but I'd say the internal battle there to want to go over, and
Yeah. There was many a sleepless night there and many a very dark moment.
Definitely. You can drink all you want and have the fucking front. And go, doesn't bother me none.
Yeah. Till you're in that room on your own. Room on your own with time to think about the reality of stuff. Yeah. Absolutely. I thought it was nice. We get into the piece here with Bronwyn, where she talks about after 15 years the opportunity of going to visit her dad, and Amaris doesn't take the opportunity. She didn't go, but Bronwyn goes and makes the trip to go see her dad, and that's a very powerful moment in the documentary.
Gutsy young lady.
Absolutely, where she just and nothing was planned. She just basically showed up, walked in, he was there. I can't imagine the emotion and the outpouring of that moment. Must have been unbelievable. Not only for Bronwyn, obviously, But imagine for the dad, imagine for Dynamite, like just your daughter just showing up after 15 years and just wants to sit with you and hold you and reconcile and make things right. Must have been unbelievable.
We talked about that on the Dynamo episode, as you know, and it was funny because I don't know whether it was on the show or it was after it, but we'll probably talk about it on part 2. But it was funny. I'd made a little gag. I think it was at the end of the show. I was like, Jesus, I said the one biggest regret, I said, because I was talking to Mark, obviously his brother, who was really close with, and Mark had always said, look, whenever you can come over, don't worry, I'll get you introduced and blah, blah, blah. Because I always said I want to at least shake the man's hand one day, at least, just to pay respects. Kev Rock's mutual friend of all of us said, I always said, if I could just shake the man's hand and have a beer with him, that'd be enough for me, and I could ride off into the sunset, you know. And said it to Brahman, and she said to me, she goes, oh my God, I wish I'd known you a year earlier, because if I'd have known you were only over in Ireland, it's a 30-minute flight, I would have asked you to come over and went with me, because I was shitting myself. Yeah. And I'd have been like, I don't know how much, legit, like, she's listening to this now, she'll verify that. I was like, I don't know how much use I'd have been. I'd have been a bag of nerves too. She's gonna fucking tell me.
Bless her. It's probably for the best day, and it didn't happen that way. I was like, yeah, Brahma, give me 1 second. Now, with Tiger Mask in '83. No, shh, give us a second. We're talking.
That's a fact.
Shut up, crying there, will you?
Or I could imagine the two of you walking in and him whispering to Brahman, "Is this the boyfriend?" Or something like that, and you're just sitting there going, "What?"
Do you want me to be?
And he leaps up out of the chair.
Broken jaw.
Broken jaw.
Because he would probably still nearly be thinking of Brahman as this kid, like, you know what I mean? Like,
no, it is. You know, I'm glad we kind of made a little bit, you know, kind of happy story of it. But it was like, it really was a beautiful tale. Like, and you know, for more context on that, do go back and watch the Dynamo's dozen episode with Brahman, because she talks about it in detail. About the whole experience, and she talks about it for about 20 minutes, you know, from the start to the finish, about the 3 days. This is kind of a condensed version of it on the show, but continuing on anyway. That was
kind of, you know, it moves on then, and they talk about how Dynamite, he had a stroke towards the end of his life, and Spivey comes on again, and he says how much he loved him and how much he misses him, which I thought was a really nice part of the documentary, you know. And he was visibly upset talking about it, even, you know what I mean? It's just,
and his mate Tom McGee, don't forget, you know, that was a very, very difficult thing.
Scott McGee, wasn't it?
Scott McGee, sorry, Scott McGee. Tom McGee was the lad that the unfitting match with Bret Hart. That's who that was.
Totally different Hart story.
Yeah, different story. My bad. That was almost like the Grizzly Smith and Grizzly Adams deal.
It's an industry of names, you know.
But no, that was very, like, that. I found that very tough to watch. Man, I'm not gonna lie, I welled up both times I seen that, when he goes, "What do you want me to do? Sit here and cry?" You know,
the bit that got me now, obviously Bronwyn, but the bit that got me was when Spivey talked about when he rang him, and he said, "I love you," and he said, and Dynamite Kid said, "Why?" Jesus Christ! And that's what Dynamite Kid thought of himself at that stage. It's like, who could love me? It was absolutely heartbreaking.
He'd almost accepted that he was a piece of shit, and he wasn't. You know what I mean? Like, all the stuff that he had read from people, and I can verify this as well. And I just want to say this from the different side as well. And I told myself I would. I have been friends with Mark for a long time, and I've talked to Mark, his brother, who was his little brother, that's obviously talked about in the show, but they don't want anything to do with it, and that's absolutely fair enough. But I think I would be I'd be doing Mark a disservice. Mark was there with him by his side. Mark has his ashes, you know, in his house. I mean, his two boys absolutely idolized their uncle. I saw a lot of the good side of Tom Billington. Let's not call him the Dynamite Kid here for this particular thing. Like, it, you know, a lot of people knew the Dynamite Kid. Not many people knew Tom Billington, and Mark Billington did. And, you know, that's his big brother, you know, and he done a lot for them, and they were close, they were family. And he always obviously idolizes his big brother, as most people do. But when your big brother literally flew, to the mountains, that's even better, right?
Yeah.
So shout out to Mark and the family over there as well, kind of living the legacy and continuing the legacy in the right way, which is great. I think it's because, as I said, I knew a lot of stuff internally, what was going on, when Tom was sick and stuff like that. And there was a lot of all this negative press. Sometimes people have to remember there's a family behind this. When you're giving out about people online and typing your little keyboard shit, there's a fambe behind it all.
You spoke to me so many times about that during that period.
Yeah, that.
Remember the conversations we had?
Yeah, and it was very, very difficult time. And people can go back to the Dynamite tribute episode even, and don't go for it just because I want to click. Go for it and actually realize the level of love for the man. I was able to get Harley Race on literally at a call to speak about Dynamite the day that he died, purely because of how respected he was. You know what I mean? People like Bobby Fulton were willing to just come on, boom, and talk about him. And Bobby Fulton, who Jim Cornette absolutely idolizes, and one of the nicest guys on the planet, just talks about how much he loves Dynamite and how friendly a guy he was. And I think we went back earlier and we talked about how once you're in, then the bravado's gone. Do you know what I mean? In that circle, people have this idea of Dynamite Kid going up as a small man going, you want to fight? The little jacker. It's more on the outside. It's a protected bubble kind of thing. And
it's also in that particular industry, in that particular trade, when you speak, but you can put the pieces together by who's opening their mouth and when they open it and what they say. And
yes.
There seems to be a common theme amongst the old timers, the old schoolers, and the old goers that there's nothing but honor and reverence for them.
Yeah.
And these are men who you can do two things. Again, I keep leaning back to the masculinity aspect of things. It's what I am. It's what I understand, and it's what we all do. And this business is amplified masculinity. These men who talk about him are men who other men speak great and well of, and there's almost a camaraderie between. There's two ways we can do this. You either have me back or you don't. And if you don't have me back, you're fucking nothing to me. But if you've got me back, even when I'm wrong, that means something to me. And these old schoolers and these old timers, money where your mouth is, you know what I mean? It's fight or flight. And he seems to have had this effect amongst, as a side note to it, it just the what do they call it? The bromance between fucking Spivey and Davey or Dynamite really came across. There was almost a love to the end for him, and that shit you gotta respect. There was something there. To have an anchor that deep, for him to be even calling that much past his prime, to be checking in on him and to still be fucking cut up about him. Yeah. There was something there to him as a man. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I sometimes wonder when I watch the documentary and stuff like that, I wonder, obviously with Dynamite passing and stuff like that, I wonder did he ever realise the depth of the love that certain men in the business had for him? I wouldn't say he had any idea.
He didn't have a clue. Yeah. He was willing to sit and rot when there was men willing to pick up the pieces if he was willing to extend himself. And him extending himself, it almost, we share something in this town, in this city, from our age, very in common with where he would have come up in. England and Ireland is very common in the sense that we didn't have shit. We had the spit in their mouth and we had the spine on our back. We kept our mouth shut, our head down. We were raised by men like this. Do you know what I mean? They'd walk from birth to the grave. They walked. They give you and put everything in front of you and never open their mouth about a day's pain in their life. And you look up at them of these as some kind of idol. But when you go through this life yourself, you realize how much anguish is involved in day to day. I mean, going out there and fucking doing your 9 to 5 Monday to Friday, or your 9 to fucking 10 till 7, or your 10 till 11, whatever you have to do to keep your job. And you might see your kid for fucking 4 hours a week until the child is ready to go out and get drunk and find a girlfriend himself. And you just keep your mouth shut, your head down, you say, well, this is the way of things.
Yeah.
I mean, that generation found it even so hard to say, son, I'm proud of you. There was men in that generation who couldn't hug their sons. And these generations raise each other because that's what you have to be. In a steel place, you have to be steel to survive. And I think him being from where he was at the time he was and thrown into an international world growing and different variances of that. Do you know what I mean?
Also think, Jay, as well, and I think that's a really good point you make, and it's just that kind of popping into my head. Like when you think of like a small kind of town like Wigan, you know,
industrial unemployment is the only two things they would have had when he was coming up.
Very much so. So you're talking about a lad going over to a completely different world, you know what I mean?
Yes.
Different morals. And I mean, don't get me wrong, Calgary wasn't exactly boom, but at the same time, Calgary was still, you know, probably a little bit of a better
the fucking position. New world. It was still the new world.
You know, so you're bringing those mentality that you have at 19 years old and getting married at 20 years old when you really haven't fucking, you know, lived, you know what I mean? And you're throwing yourself into this world too. So it's like I say, I'm gonna preface this before we hand it back to Niall to finish the show. Like, it's easy to sit there, ladies and gentlemen, and I mean we're all guilty of it, and sit there with our key, you know, with our typing and going, oh well, wasn't he a bollocks? Wasn't he a cunt? Wasn't he this? And that goes for any man. You gotta there's like Eric Bischoff, God bless him for this. Context is king. You know what I mean? There's so many layers to this. We are human beings. We're all flawed. And just remember, before you throw stones at people, just remember to make sure that your own house is in order. You know what I mean?
Unless you're Jesus, you don't get to judge. And you ain't Jesus.
Exactly. So, Niall, bring us to the bit. I'm glad that we talked about this before I cry.
Yeah. Well, no, it's context. It is. It matters. Wigan, when he was coming up, is not fucking Miami in the 80s running lines of coke off strippers' tits. No. It's hard gravel makes a hard man.
Damn straight. Yeah.
So we move into a very powerful part of the documentary towards the end here, where Bronwyn obviously talks about how she was in such shock at his passing she couldn't even let herself cry for a week. And obviously Michelle makes the call to Amherst telling her about his passing, and it was very powerful insofar as she said he's by your side now. And I thought that was a very powerful moment in the documentary. Then Dave as well. Dave comes on and he says, Dynamite, he'll never receive the credit that he deserves because of the sadness of the tragedy of the story, which is so true. And Michelle obviously wants people to understand that, like, when you talk about the Dynamite Kid, don't forget to talk about CTE and depression and all this stuff that we know about now when you look back on these situations, you know. And she doesn't want anyone to knock him. Being a wrestler is great, but what about a father or a husband? Which I thought was a very powerful statement for her. And again, we are seeing the unbelievable strength and character of this woman in this documentary. And to be honest with you, I think, as you said, Ian, I know a certain section of the family weren't happy with this happening, stuff like that. But to see how this woman portrayed herself and how she came across, I think it's unbelievable and admirable, and I think the family in total should rally behind this woman without a shadow.
And when she saw, and when she said as well, on top of that, when she did turn around and goes, "Now I get it," you know, that's what he wanted to leave.
Yeah, but I can guarantee, lad, if I didn't grow up watching wrestling with Ian there, I would have thought Dynamite Kid was out and out scumbag. You know what I mean? Because you always hear that particular story of when he dragged her across the floor and held a gun to her face. And even herself said, you know, a hell of a lot more stuff happened in his and our lives. You know, and that's all I know for a fact. If it wasn't for growing up watching wrestling with Ian, I would have thought he was bang, full stop. I wouldn't have thought about looking back on what he'd done years before that ever happened.
Look at the pictures of him with the kids, you know what I mean? Always sitting on his shoulder, sitting and Brahman mentioned that on my show, on the Dynamo's Dozen show, should I say, one of our shows. And he said, like, always just sitting on the arm, you know what I mean? Always very, you know, just kind of loving. So it's again, I think 100% Michelle's a strong woman, and I think her bringing that in and talking about CT and depression, that's such a super powerful statement. And
it fucking matters, though. It matters because it's the truth.
It matters, you know.
You know, what I took from the whole thing is the truth is no man is one thing to all, to everyone. He is something different to every aspect of his life. But the overriding, and Ian, you're right, all of the family should come together and, for better for worse, realize, recognize, and understand that it is what it is. It's all out there, warts and all. His work still holds up, and so does his failings as a man, and that's nothing to be ashamed of either. It wasn't a fucking easy road to walk, but overridingly speaking, the one thing I'm glad about is that it was her voice who got to be the last voice on the subject, and she explained it better than anybody else could from her perspective, because nobody had as many parts of the piece or the puzzle as she did. Yeah. I'm just glad that she's the last voice on the subject. Everybody else can do their hearsay and conjecture and have their judgment.
The last good wife that he had, not allowed to say too much on that.
It's none of my business and none of the subject's business.
Because we know there was a picture shown on that, obviously with your one, while he was very sick, which I wish that picture hadn't been shown. To be honest with you, it should have been, but
yeah, absolutely. But then we finish out, and I think it's kind of fitting that we finish out with Mick Foley, as we've drawn the parallels, really.
His job's working enough again to talk.
Mick Foley is like Santa Claus, though, isn't he? He's the soothing voice. He's the soothing voice when you're getting chased by a Yeti to tell you everything.
It's still real to him, goddammit, and he still fucking loves it.
If I'm getting chased by Sasquatch in the North American woods, and I hear Mick Foley saying it's going to be okay.
But I thought it was brilliant as well, the way he didn't talk about Dynamite Kid. He talked about him as Tommy, and he turned around and said Tommy was an artist and how brilliant he was, and he said he was not the first and he won't be the last to suffer from their art. And
Bruce Springsteen quote as well,
trust the artist, trust the art, not the artist. I think, because that was one thing when I was watching this. I was saying to myself, was like, do you separate the art from the artist? And then that quote came up at the end, and I was like, well, maybe I can, maybe you can.
If I didn't, there'd be nothing left on my shelves. I'd have to sit there eating dry bread till I went to sleep.
So he finishes with the quote to end this show as well. You become the biggest star you can imagine, and you pay for it for the rest of your life, which I thought was an amazing quote.
And I also want to end the show on this quote from the end of Dynamite Kid's book. Something I don't even have to read. I remember it since I was 18. If I was asked, would I do it all again? Absolutely, I would do it all again. It was a hell of a ride. No regrets.
Awesome. Gentlemen, a pleasure as always. Even for some of these tough subjects, you know where to go. YouTube, Dynamo Podcast Network, Anchor for audio versions of the show. And we will talk to you again next week.
Rest in peace, kid.
Rest in peace, Dynamite Kid.